What's up, Lego builders? Welcome back to Coconut Brick Studios for another week of building Coruscant in LEGO. Oh baby, do I have a big week planned. Not only am I going to be building the final skyscraper for the apartment section, but I'm also going to be finishing up the hallway where the apartments are. And dare I say, even more importantly than the building is going to be the planning for this section. Because as you guys have noticed, the clone base is pretty much done, the apartment complex is getting finished up, and so my sights and my thoughts are starting to turn towards the next phase of this mock and trying to figure out what exactly am I going to be doing. Am I going to be building the Senate building next, doing the middle section next with the food court and more apartments? All that's going to be talked about and more in today's episode. So if you're excited to get some building and some planning in, don't forget to execute Order 66 on that like button. And while you're down there, if you haven't already, consider subscribing and tapping that notification bell so you will be notified as soon as my next video drops. All right, before I dive into building this week, there are a couple of things I want to show you. Starting off down here. So I got a lot of comments about the lights, stuff to use, what I could possibly do to help illuminate this room better. And my dad was over here on Saturday and he suggested using the same piece but in trans clear. And a lot of you guys were of the same mind, so I've got this big 4x4 trans clear dish. This is bigger than I would have liked to go. I would have liked to have gone with a 3x3 or 2x2 in trans clear. Unfortunately, I don't have either of those right now. So this is what it looks like with the 4x4. And you can see it does a much better job of illuminating everything, which makes me really happy because that means I'm done. I figured it out. And I really like these big dishes. They add that kind of classy, elegant feel that I was looking for. Then up here on my Saturday live stream, I was working on the base of this skyscraper. Some of you guys were there and will remember this. So I'm working on like just some kind of large foundational pop out or support because I don't want the skyscraper to just connect directly to the ground looking like this, just like a tube. I want some kind of like extra support down there, so I'm gonna have these large things sticking out the side. Honestly, they look kind of like the fins of a rocket ship, so I'm gonna have four, one on each side like that. I'm not super happy with the design right now. Unfortunately, I don't really know why, so I can't really change it, but so I'm just gonna leave it like this for now, and then once I get all four built and set up around the skyscraper, I might better know like, okay, what do I like, what don't I like, what needs to change. And the last thing I wanted to show you guys is the third skyscraper, which is going to go right here. I'm hoping to have it started by the end of this update. Right now, all I have are these smaller pop-outs that I showed you. They're going to go on the front and the back, basically like that, but they're going to be a much taller. The middle, or kind of like the main section of the skyscraper, is going to look similar to this. I'm also going to be working down here. I'd like to get the elevator finished and this last doorway finished so I can start working on covering this up and getting it ready so that when I want to put this back panel on, I can do so. That means all I have left to do really is up here, and I'm starting to itch to move on to the next sections. I feel like we've been on here for a while, and so the sooner I get that done and get this part ready to be plated off, I can move on to the next area. It's time to revisit the base skyscraper design I made for Coruscant. For those of you who haven't watched the early updates, I came up with this design pretty early on with the hopes of it being a pretty easy base model that I could replicate a lot and change slightly to create many different variations of the same building. As I was studying the architecture on the planet, I noticed there was a common theme: tall rectangular buildings with rounded tops. Some had pop-outs on the sides, some were super wide, some looked like four separate buildings connected together at the center, but they all had kind of like a similar architectural style. So I created this base design to kind of represent that base style that could also be changed into whatever shape or style I wanted, but still match the other buildings on the mock and create that Coruscant vibe. The first panel of the building is the most complicated side because this one has the windows, which are transclear cylinders with a row of black brick behind them. At the top of the building, I have small stacks of light bluish gray cylinders set up in a pyramid shape to somewhat match the curve of the quarter cylinder slopes that I used to make the top. This time around, I'm going to add some half pegs into the cylinders so that when I stick the second panel on, they will be able to connect to both sides of the building. I didn't do that on the last building, and the light bluish gray cylinders kept breaking off and falling down into the skyscraper interior. All right, the building's done and ready to be put on the mock. Unfortunately, I ran out of tiles, so this side I didn't get tiled off at all, but one side should be good enough for now. It's a little bit taller than the previous one I built. This is what they look like when they are at the same level, and I did that for a reason because I want this to be the shortest building on the mock. And so this one's gonna sit right over here next to this big boy, and this one is not going to be as tall as that one because, you know, I want this one to be the tallest one, but I'd like this one to have some decent height to it. It is going to have its own little foundation thing. I'm trying to decide if I should copy this foundation piece exactly and do it over there just because, you know, the building itself is relatively the same, or if I should try doing something new. Either way, it won't be able to be exactly like this one because this building is going to have these pop-outs sitting on the front, so the foundation itself is going to need to be wider. But that brings me to the next thing I want to talk about, and that is these. I'm trying to figure out how tall I should make it, like how far up I want it to go. I'm thinking about maybe like right there, stopping just below the second row of slopes right here, which would mean I'd probably need to add about 8 to 10 studs in the bottom, which isn't too bad. As far as placement goes, this is where I was thinking about putting it, but as I'm standing here looking at it, I think I might have to change that. You can see this whole row of windows right here is just going to be staring directly into this side of the building. So it's like, why even put windows in right there? So maybe what I might do is put it this way, like this, so the windows are facing towards and away from the Galactic Senate building, or maybe I could have it kind of at an angle. I don't know. Once I figure out what I want to do at the base, I can probably get a good idea of how I want to position the skyscraper. But this is exciting. Now all 3 skyscrapers have been officially started and placed on the apartment section, which means now I can go in and add some more of these smaller buildings and pop outs and kind of fill out the rest of this roof, which is good because, like I said earlier, this first third of the mock is pretty much done. The clone base just needs some small finishing details. The apartment complex just needs the buildings to be finished up, and then that roof, and then finish out the apartment area, which a lot of that I should get finished up this week. And now my sights and planning are starting to turn towards this next section. Thinking like, what is this gonna be? What I want it to look like. And I'm not only that, I'm trying to decide what section do I jump to next, because this mock is split into thirds. We have the first third, which is the first apartments and the clone base. The middle third, which is the food kind of like a shopping area, and then another apartment complex area, and then the third section, which is the Galactic Senate building and kind of the plaza out in front of it. And the reason I'm not sure which one I should start next is because I don't want to build this middle section and then get to this last part and realize I don't have enough room for the Senate building. That section is far more important than this one. So I'm thinking maybe I should start the Senate building next and just see what space is left when I'm done with that and fill that in with whatever buildings will fit. But anyways, that's why I want to get all this finished up, is because I want to think about that and figure that out. Plus, right here on this side, one of the reasons I've left it alone is because there's actually going to be a giant Skybridge that comes out of the apartment complex and then opens up and turns into the kind of like shopping / eating center. But you know, all this will come after this is finished up, so it's time for me to get back to work. Now that I have all the skyscrapers started and I have a general idea of where they will go, I can add in some of the smaller buildings and pop-ups on the roof. These have been really tough for me to build because it's hard to get a close-up shot of the roofs of Coruscant, so I can't see what exactly the shapes are supposed to represent or look like. And if I have a hard time knowing what something is supposed to be or do, I have a hard time designing and building it in LEGO. So what I'm going to do is just build small structures to fill up the empty spaces between the skyscrapers. The one I'm working on now is going to divide the two sides of the roof, have a jog to the left, and end in a rectangle. I put the jog in there to make the shape of this a little bit more unique and to kind of follow the path the skyscrapers create. I'm using the same technique of plate on its side as walls to match the aesthetic of the rest of this apartment complex. I am using my last bit of motivation to finish the hallway. All I need to add is the elevator and the last apartment door. I kept bouncing different elevator door designs around, but I couldn't land on one that I really liked. and I decided it should probably match the color of the other doors, so ultimately I just decided to make the design the exact same. Then I added some inverted slopes at the top of the doorway to add in some detail. It looks kind of like a garage door, to be honest, a little bit too industrial maybe, and I want to know what you guys think. Do you think I should keep it how it is or change it? Let's take one last look at Coruscant and talk about my thoughts regarding the rest of this MOC. So here is a look at that somewhat completed pop-up that I was building. You can see there's that little jog there. It was really tough to figure out how to get a panel to sit in between these two wedge plates just because of the height they were at. Ultimately, what I ended up doing is just building this little panel and then sticking some bricks on the inside. And those bricks don't even connect to anything. They just act as a counterweight to keep that panel in place. On the top of this structure, I'm actually going to have a secondary structure like this, so that's kind of smaller. So it'll look kind of like almost like a pyramid of sorts. This is going to mirror the shape of the bottom one, so it's going to come over here, jut up this way, and then I don't know what's going to happen right here yet. But all in all, I'm really liking how it looks, and it really helps fill out this large gap that was right here between this skyscraper and these two. I also finished out the hallway. I am waiting on this lantern piece and top dish, but other than that, I have everything else. It's looking pretty good. The only thing I don't really like is the elevator. Like I said, it looks kind of like a garage door, like some kind of like warehouse door. Not a fancy elevator, but I don't know that I care enough to change that, and I honestly don't even know if that's going to be that much of a, that big of a deal, especially once I get everything else finished and then take another look at it. So for now, I'm just going to leave it. So what happens next for this hallway? Because obviously this is not going to be exposed. By the time this is finished, I want this to have a roof, and then I'm going to have support pillars running at intervals running along this entire hallway. And all this right here is going to be bricked off. So you're going to have a wall, and then it's going to come back down this way, and this hallway is going to be exposed. I don't really need to put this wall in until the MOC's finished, and I definitely don't want to do it now because I'm still building up here, so I have to push down on this roof, which means I have to have a hand underneath to support it. So I want to have all of this finished before I cover it up. But that's it as far as the build goes. I have been doing some thought towards like what I'm going to start doing next here and when I'm going to start doing it. I think my biggest hesitation for moving forward is I didn't want to leave sections unfinished and have this full MOC built, but then have to go back through and finish each of the sections. But I also don't want to have this section entirely done before I move on to this section because the beginning part is going to be boring, and so I want to be able to jump between the boring stuff and more exciting stuff that's happening over here. So what the conclusion I came to was I want to have the design and vision for this section finished before I move on, but not necessarily everything completely done being built. That way I feel like I'll have kind of like a happy medium where like this section feels complete and ready to move on, but then we're not basically starting over with the MOC series and back to doing boring foundation stuff. I'll talk about all this more as more things get fleshed out, but that's pretty much everything. Now to figure out what's going down next week. Man, what a week. This was a good week. This was a week that made me really excited because now that this section is starting to get finished up, like I've said, I've been thinking a lot more about what's coming next. And it's been really fun to put in the skyscrapers and kind of, putting together that iconic Coruscant skyline, which means next week I'm going to be doing more of that. I want to get the base of that final skyscraper done and maybe even getting the rest of the apartment roof finished, minus like some final tiling and plate, which would be crazy, but I mean, I don't have a whole lot left to do before I move on. All that being said, it was a good week. Got another good week coming. Don't forget to let me know what you thought about this update down below in the comments, and I will catch you guys next time. But until then, happy building.